It's Friday, June 11th, 2021, and this is the Washington Times front page. Thanks for joining us. I'm George Gerbo. The Pentagon and State Department are working feverishly to ensure the U.S. Embassy's long-term security in Afghanistan as combat troops leave the country this summer. Pentagon correspondent Ben Wolfgang reports officials are hashing out final plans to protect the embassy from Taliban militants who are quickly capturing more territory. Beyond the threat of violence, the U.S. faces the prospect that Afghan leaders will strike down a power-sharing deal with the Taliban, and a new government will demand that American diplomats leave the country. U.S. Central Command Leader General Frank McKenzie said this week that the U.S. Embassy will remain open as long as we're invited to be there. He said he's in direct consultation with the State Department to determine how much diplomatic security, in the form of U.S. Marines, will be needed in Kabul. A State Department spokesperson said security at the embassy will be sufficient to meet any particular threat. On Capitol Hill, a dozen Jewish House Democrats have issued a statement condemning Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar over her recent statements equating the U.S. and Israel to Hamas and the Taliban. Joseph Clark reports the group said she used rhetoric that reflects deep-seated prejudice and provides cover to terrorist groups. In a statement from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and her Democratic leadership, they said they encouraged legitimate criticism of the U.S. and Israel, but that drawing false equivalencies between democracies and groups that engage in terrorism foments prejudice and undermines progress toward a future of peace and security for all. The rebuke of Omar began as a move to censure her, but Pelosi and her lieutenants instead used the resolution to broadly condemn hate speech. The resolution did not specifically name Omar. Staying on the Hill, Stephen Dinan takes a look at the details in President Biden's spending proposal submitted to Congress late last month, which increases spending nearly across the board and forgoes any calls to Congress to eliminate wasteful programs. It's the first presidential budget in more than 15 years, dating back to the George W. Bush administration, not to provide a list to Congress of suggested cuts. Overall, Biden's budget calls for spending about $6 trillion in 2022, rising to $8.2 trillion a decade from now. Federal public debt would increase from 110% of gross domestic product this year to 114% of gross domestic product in 2024 and 117% of the GDP in 2031. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget calculates that Biden's blueprint does contain some $214 billion in trims to projected spending. Most of those trims come from a pledge to limit growth in funding for the Pentagon. A reminder that you can find all these stories at WashingtonTimes.com/front page. Don't have access to the Times yet? Visit WashingtonTimes.com/George and get 25% off your annual subscription. Across sports, leagues and teams have encouraged athletes to get vaccinated against COVID-19. And locally, the Washington football team is no exception. But officials found that a football team, like other slices of American society, will have some folks who don't want to get the shot. Sports reporter Matt Paris reports in Major League Baseball, 20 of 30 teams have hit the 85% threshold the league required before virus protocols could be relaxed. In the NBA, Commissioner Adam Silver said in late April that 70% of players had received at least one shot. And although wide-ranging concerns remain over the upcoming Olympic Games in Japan, officials there say 80% of those who have qualified for the games are vaccinated. Still, there's skepticism about the vaccine in locker rooms and training facilities. Washington defensive end Montez Sweat appeared unconvinced this week, saying he was not a fan of the information push from an immunologist who spoke to the team. Washington coach Ron Rivera said he won't go at anybody and degrade them just because they have a difference of opinion. And finally, Seth MacLachlan takes a look at the now finalized race to be governor of Virginia between Terry McAuliffe and Glenn Youngkin. McAuliffe, a former governor of the Commonwealth who's looking to return to Richmond, cruised to victory this week in the five-way Democratic primary. He secured more than 60% of the vote in a contest where turnout exceeded most expectations. Youngkin secured the Republican nomination last month at the party state convention. His camp says McAuliffe's quest hinges on his ability to energize liberal activists who see him as too moderate. The 54-year-old Youngkin is a political newcomer and former CEO of the Carlyle Group, a private equity firm. Find all of today's front page stories at WashingtonTimes.com/front page or the Washington Times app, and subscribe for free to the front page. Just search Washington Times on your favorite podcast platforms. You can follow us as well on Twitter and Instagram at WashTimes for breaking news, sports, commentary, and more. For the Washington Times, I'm George Gerbo.